Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. Brought to you by the fine people at Polyhymnia. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
Listener Elliot Zarowski wrote this week asking about our discussion of right to repair. And Elliot wrote some good stuff. He spent a lot of time on this email. So rather than summarize, I'm just going to read some excerpts from his letter. Hello, James and Antony. My name is Elliot Zarowski. I'm a 16-year-old high school student and have been listening to your podcast for a long time with my father. I have a lot of computer knowledge and am working toward a cybersecurity job in the military. I recently listened to episode 423 where you talked about right to repair laws, and I wanted to share my views. This is great. I do not know a lot about politics, but I do have opinions about a few topics, and the right to repair is one of them. When people talk about the right to repair, they usually mention cars and how they should be able to work on their own car without the manufacturer purposefully making it harder. This is a good example, but I think there is a more pressing matter. Computers, especially laptops, have been getting increasingly harder and harder to repair. As I write this, I'm typing on a MacBook Air. It has what's called a fused keyboard, which means the keyboard is fused to the motherboard. Do you get that? You use Macs.
Yeah.
Well, it's fused to the keyboard. I didn't realize that that was a thing. The motherboard, of course, is the expensive part of the laptop. So Elliot goes on. Let's say a key broke on my fused keyboard. I would have to replace the majority of my laptop to fix it, which with the age and model of my laptop would cost me more than to just get a new one. Now, I wouldn't say no to a brand new shiny laptop, but this brings up an issue that you both mentioned. Suppose my keyboard broke and I was forced to buy a new laptop. What happens to the old one? Well, it lovingly gets shipped off overseas to a country that deals with the lithium and chemicals in our computers. My laptop would be sent to a, quote, recycling plant, which I think you can guess isn't really recycling as much as we would imagine it to be. I love this phrase. All the chemically parts and toxic components turn into horrible pollution and e-waste. Our recycled computers pollute other countries. Even though I agree with the free market and I have faith that eventually people will come around and these companies will change their behavior and make repairable computers, I'm afraid that by the time that happens, the damage will already be done. In conclusion, I also have a soft spot for right to repair legislation, even though I think the market would do better without the government getting involved. This has been an issue for so long and has already caused so much damage. I think this is a good step in the right direction.
I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't think the market would do better.
Well, he's raised some interesting points, but I want to give you this closing paragraph, which just touched me. Also, I want to say how much I love this podcast. I know you both joke about how much hate mail you get, but just know there are a lot of people out there like myself and my dad who listen, learn, and laugh. The hate will always stick out more than the love. Please keep doing what you're doing and let me know your thoughts with a reply. I would love to talk more on this subject. Elliot. Okay, Elliot, let me dig in here because you have raised an issue that lots of serious adults raise, and they point to stuff just like you described. And they said, look, this is a market failure. This is an instance in which capitalism needs to be reined in because the market fails and you get pollution because of people just throwing their laptops into the trash and ends up polluting the environment. To which I respond, this is not a market failure. This is a government failure. The government's role is to protect, define, enforce property rights. And whenever you have a situation where someone is polluting the environment, they're imposing a cost on someone else, they're violating that person's property rights. This is a good and proper place for government to step in and do something.
I don't think I want to say that.
Well, let me give you one more thing. There is a kludgy way that you can deal with this through market processes, and that's to use what's called a Pigouvian tax. Pigouvian. Pigouvian tax. A Pigouvian tax is a tax on the product that's meant to raise its price enough that you dissuade the people from polluting as much as they were polluting. And I think in theory, it's an interesting thing. In practice, you've got to set the tax at the right way, and you're using government anyway because that's what you need to impose a tax. So if you're going to do that, let's just have some laws here about what you can and cannot do with the pollution.
By the time we get to Pigouvian taxes, I think it's time for me to say, and another thing. Or maybe, and now for something completely different.
Well, the whole point of our book, Cooperation and Coercion, is that it's not markets or government. It's markets and government, using each one in its appropriate place. And here's an appropriate place for government. There aren't many, but there are some.
Let's see what you've got to say about this hot mess that I'm going to talk about in a second. Do you recall the government's antitrust case against Google? Do you even remember this under the Biden administration?
Vaguely.
Well, I mean, the idea is that Google is so massive and so pervasive that it can't be avoided, right? That somehow there's an unfair advantage baked right into the present day system for Google. It's kind of like, dare I say it, when Microsoft with Internet Explorer had such a dominance that nobody could compete the browser wars without some sort of government intervention. Do you remember all that?
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, how good do you think Google is? Quick, Ant, what's the second best search engine in the world?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's the second best, but one that people use for security purposes is DuckDuckGo.
Yeah, DuckDuckGo is fine, and Bing is pretty good, right? There are other search options out there. Mm-hmm. And yet, that's not going to be what does Google in. What does Google in is going to be artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Not only is Google not going to be the biggest search engine anymore, it might not be in the search engine business at all anymore.
Yes, I had these thoughts just the other day as I was once again using ChatGPT to search the internet.
Well, and here's an interesting thing that comes along with this. Google searches have fallen for the first time in decades, for the first time ever, for all intents and purposes. Well, it's already happening. So on the one hand, you've got the government saying, Google, your unfair advantage just won't do. Mm-hmm. And on the other, the market is saying, what unfair advantage?
Right. Yes. And here's a beautiful example of technology moving so fast that the government is attacking a problem that existed years ago. The market's already fixed it and is on to the next thing.
Now we're going to have to figure out which AI chatbot is too powerful and which others need some kind of help. But Google isn't going to factor into this for very much longer.
Yeah. The mistake that people make is they see some big thing like Google and they say this is a problem without asking, why is it a big thing? If it's a big thing because it's so good that that's what people want to use, leave it alone.
Yeah, that's not a problem. That's the exact opposite of a problem.
Yeah, that's not a problem. That's a solution.
That's right. Which, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week. Do you have a guess as to who the foolishness of the week might be about?
I have been largely unplugged. I did read a headline, only a headline, that Donald Trump fell asleep at some meeting with Saudi Arabian princes. And then another thing about Donald Trump, it's the airplane. Qatar is giving him a $700 million or $70 billion airplane or some ridiculous thing.
By the time this podcast is heard by other human beings, we will be at least 4 more foolishnesses from the Qatar
I know, they
airplane.
keep piling up.
But you are exactly right. It is Donald Trump. It's just not any of the things you said, which is kind of funny in and of itself, right?
We should just change its name to Donald Trump of the Week.
Well, we're kind of getting there. And this came up when Barack Obama was president quite some time ago. The president has a daily security briefing, an intelligence briefing. You're
right.
aware of this, yes?
Yes.
Well, Barack Obama hardly went to any. Right, he was lucky to make one a week. Donald Trump has been to 12 since he took office.
Oh my God, 100 days ago.
It's well over 100 days as we sit and talk to each other today. So we can conclude that he's making about 10% of his daily intelligence briefings. What could possibly go wrong? What in those meetings might they talk about that he might have to know in order to be an effective president? Listen to me saying all these idiotic things.
Well, but you know, James, between the last president and the current president, I think there's a compelling empirical argument now for the claim that maybe we don't need a president at all.
Well, we do, because it's in the Constitution, but it could be more like a Calvin Coolidge president, and that would be just fine. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to run on the platform, and maybe this is my destiny, that the presidency is a part-time job and everybody needs to cut the and we're just not going to pay much attention to this anymore.
If you only need to go to 10% of the briefings, that's a part-time job.
And it's the kind of job I've been looking for my entire life.
And James, Americans will do it for half the price that the current president is charging.
No, I won't.
Yes, you would.
No, I will not. Because I can't take gold-plated jets from the Qataris.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
I digress. We'll get back to that some other time. Instead of Ant picking on Donald Trump as we are wont to do round about the foolishness of the week portion of the weekly program, I want to maybe take a look at Democrats, which we haven't done in quite some time, but we hear them a lot lately railing against the Trump administration in a very public and hostile way. It's clear that they're of a mind collectively that it's impossible, literally impossible, for him to do anything right ever. If he sat down and ate oatmeal for breakfast, they would find a way to claim that he did it incorrectly.
Right.
Right. So, okay. What are you folks up to right now? If it's about maybe taking stock of where you are, given where we are in the Trump administration.
You know, but this is a serious question. I've been thinking about this for a while. We're not hearing anything from the Democrats.
Where the hell are any of them? I mean, the only time I hear about any of them is when somebody who works for Chuck Schumer sends out a tweet.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally the only time. Or when I turn on my TV, and we'll get to this point in a little bit, I guess, and I see AOC and Bernie Sanders on their anti-oligarchy tour on the private jet that Bernie Sanders is not ashamed of taking. Let's just say that. It's a little strange that a socialist would be interested in a private jet, but here we are. Here we are. We got two socialists interested in private jets. But what are the Democrats doing as a whole to indicate that they have a plan? And dare I say that their plan is somehow different than the last plan that they lost with quite badly. Well, okay, what are they up to? And I'm not sure I have any idea whatsoever what they're up to.
I haven't thought about this until you raised, I think this is the second time you've raised this topic. And now that I think on it, it seems to me they're missing some serious political opportunities. For example,
it's a golden time for them, golden opportunity.
Well, it is. Near as I can tell, the Republicans are cowed. Reasonable Republicans are afraid to be reasonable for fear of backlash from Trump supporters in their districts. So here's a prime opportunity for Democrats to be proposing all sorts of middle-of-the-road, quite reasonable legislation for the sole purpose of getting those Republicans on record as being against it, and then to use that against them in the midterms.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you would think at this moment that the Democrats would be salivating at the very possibility of a midterm election.
Yeah.
And yet,
silence.
Where are they? All I hear are crickets.
Yeah.
If you take a step back and maybe ask yourself a different sort of question and say, all right, what is up with them? What are they up to right now? And a couple of things kind of spring right into your field of vision. And the first one that I want to get back to is this anti-oligarchy tour. What in God's green earth are those two clowns? I mean, where do they get off going on an anti-oligarchy tour? I mean, come on. They're the very definition of oligarchs. And to the extent that they're not, it's because they haven't been able to get their way enough, not that they don't want to.
Right.
Well, okay, what do we do about that? They're getting crowds, 10, 15, 20,000 people. And I think what we're seeing is a group on the Democratic side, every bit as willing as their compatriots on the Republican side, to just simply ignore the obvious truth. We've got a number of people who are politically active in the American electorate right now who literally believe anything Donald Trump tells them to believe. A perfect example, somebody yesterday, I got into it because he claimed that Donald Trump has, how did the wording go? Because it is important. Donald Trump has lowered the deficit by 92%.
What?
What?
He hasn't lowered it by 9%, let alone 92.
Or by 1%, because it's projected to be $1.9 trillion this year. And we all know about projections. That's going to turn out to be low. It's going to be higher than that. Last year, it was 1.8 trillion. So no matter what happens, it's gone up, not down, and certainly not down by 92%. What on earth are you smoking that you could even think that remotely plausible?
Yep.
And yet, here we are. Another thing that comes to mind rather quickly, Doge. How many hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud and malfeasance has Doge ferreted out? How come there are no charges pending?
Right. Yeah, no criminal charges. Right.
You'll know that Doge found something when somebody is found guilty of it.
Yep.
But not only are we not there, we're not to a place where anybody is actually being charged with anything. One more example on the Republican side, a non-monetary one. Our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, where are those Epstein files again? Because those were coming out on day one. Remember, just like that trifling war in Ukraine was going to be over on day one. People buy this nonsense, hook, line, and sinker, and then they just roll with it. And it's impossible to point out to them how unbelievably incorrect they are without them just throwing some kind of insult back.
And I'm all for cutting government, waste and not waste, just cut government. However, it's possible that Doge is doing more harm than good. I hate to say that because I'm all for cutting government, but I'll give you an example. There was, and I'm forgetting what the term is, it might be provisional. There's a category of federal employee, and I'm going to use the word provisional, just put an asterisk because that might not be the right term, where you come in, you're a new hire, you're considered a provisional employee for a certain number of months, and then you become a real employee.
Probationary is what you're looking for.
Thank you, probationary. And so what Doge has done, one of the things is to say, okay, all those probationary hires, they're all cut. And you can kind of see that. These are people we just hired, want to get back to square one.
It's a lot worse than that, though.
Oh, it is worse because apparently if you've been in government for some time and you get promoted to a new position, a higher position, you are automatically probationary in that higher position. And so all those people are getting cut. The Doge cuts against probationary employees is hitting the actual people that you don't want to get rid of.
Right. And it gets even worse than that because we're going to come to a point where all kinds of things that we thought were ridiculous turned out to be more necessary than we first realized. And now it's going to cost all kinds of extra money to hire new people and train them to do the job that older people were already doing right up until the moment we fired them. And you see the foolishness that this brings with it. But, all right, okay, set all that to the side. What are Democrats doing? Why am I looking at an anti-oligarchy tour? I mean, look, AOC is clearly already running for president. And if you don't think she is, you're out of your mind. This woman is already running for president. And I would dare say she probably has the inside track in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Because who gets through the primaries? Somebody reasonably far out on the leftward tail. And that's right where we find her.
Yeah.
How are we sure? Bernie Sanders is giving her debutante ball every time I open my eyes. He clearly thinks that she's the new him. I mean, if that doesn't terrify you about her, what does? Oligarchy tour. I don't even know what to say about this. But what does it tell you about the Democratic Party as a whole? They have no plan.
Yeah.
How else do I know they have no plan? Every single thing they did to lose the 2024 election, they decided to do more of the day after they lost the election.
Yeah.
Do you think the American people are all that interested in hearing why boys and men should be allowed to play girls and women's sports? The vast majority of the American people know that that's just foolish. That sooner or later, girls and young women, they're going to get killed playing against boys and men. The reason why we have girls' sports in the first place is that they couldn't compete with boys and men.
Right.
So let's not lose our minds and claim it's anything other than that. Women cannot compete with men in these sports. Okay, that doesn't mean they shouldn't have their own sporting events, which they could measure their talents and abilities against one another. That seems perfectly reasonable. And yet the Democrats have gone out of their way to tell anybody who says what I just said, to tell them that they're bigots. You just alienate people left and right. I don't want to hear that I'm a bigot for speaking the obvious truth about something.
But you have examples of this, at least in boxing, right? And it has nothing to do with gender, but it has everything to do with size. There are weight classifications, and you box in your...
It has everything to do with gender, because a 200-pound woman is going to get her clock cleaned by a 200-pound man.
Granted, but you're not going to put a 150-pound man in the ring with a 200-pound man.
Actually, that can happen.
Really? They go across weights like that?
Only in one direction. Somebody who weighs less can move up. Somebody who weighs more cannot move down.
Fine. Okay. But again, you've got that same principle of putting some protection for the smaller guy.
Yeah, there are boxers out there, very, very good ones. Bantamweights, for example, weigh 112 pounds.
Good Lord. Wow.
Right. You go find me a grown man who weighs 112 pounds. Turns out they exist and they fight as bantams. There isn't any such thing as a professional bantamweight who could knock out a professional heavyweight. Now, one of them might be able to, I don't know, knock out one of us. Right? We're not fighting as a rule. We would probably have trouble with a professional fighter, even if he were small. But we know better than to put him in with a 200-pound professional.
Right.
That's a way to get him killed and nothing else. I mean, how entertaining is that going to be anyway? The idea of entertaining sports is that people who have relatively similar levels of ability, they play against each other. Right? That's what makes it so fascinating. And women do quite well relative to men when you get to things that include distance. So distance runners, female distance runners, almost as good as male distance runners. At the 5K level, it's not even close. But at the 26-mile level, it gets much closer. And that's kind of interesting. And, you know, we don't feel the need to separate the genders for running events, right? Because nobody's going to get killed for it. But when's the last time you turned on the Boston Marathon and saw a woman win the whole thing? Oh, yeah, it was never. So to every other marathon. This is not a slight against women. It's to make peace with the difference in biology. And that is what the Democratic Party is refusing to do. Make peace with biology. Now, you can claim that you don't like the answers that biology spits at you. I think that's just fine. But anything else, it's kind of like arguing against math, which we tell people they ought not do, because math will always win in the end. Find me the time when biology doesn't win in the end. So why can't the Democrats see that? Why do they take an issue that is deeply important to almost no one? To those people for whom it is deeply important, it is deeply important. But they don't make up anything close to a rounding error in the electorate. So why on earth are Democrats dying on that hill? I don't know. But they fall all over each other to get furthest out into the left-hand tail of the party.
I'm trying to think now about the game theory here, because game theory would suggest that in a general election, you want to move to the center to pick up as many voters as you can. But to get to the general election, you have to win the primary. And to win the primary, you're picking up not the general voters, but the more, how should I say, probably the more extreme people. They're that invested that they would get up and go and vote on an off year.
But see, I think even a little worse than that, right? Because in order to get into the primary, you have to already have stoked some interest in your very liberal electorate, your very progressive electorate, right? That side of the aisle. And in order to make any headway that way, you've got to be kind of strange, right? Centrists can't do that.
Right.
So too on the other side. This is just a blanket problem in American politics.
Let me underline this because I think this is important. To get to the general election, you have to win the primary. To win the primary, you've got to appeal not just to people in your party as opposed to people in general, but specifically to the more emotionally invested people in your party, because that's who's going to come out and vote.
No, let's call it what it is. It's the lunatic fringe of your party.
Okay, but that raises a question. If what I've just said is true, then it should be the case that you see more extreme behavior from politicians who campaign in states with closed primaries than you do from ones who campaign in states with open primaries. Because with the open primary, you could have Democrats and Republicans voting in the primary.
That's correct. I have to say, at this point, I have not done that research. I think it would go without saying in my brain that that's exactly how it would work, and I have absolutely no evidence to point to. I just have the logic of the thing to point to. If we're wrong, I'm happy to be corrected. So go ahead, go nuts. We do have these things on YouTube, so people can say horrible things about us in the comment section if they so desire. But you start to think about what all this means. Where is that reasonable voice in the Democratic Party?
Right.
All right, there are forces that conspire to keep that voice down a little bit, but centrists pop up. Bill Clinton was a centrist. Bill Clinton came of political age at a time of great personal difficulty for him.
Right.
He was able to overcome a lot and make it all the way to the White House. So don't tell me centrists can't, because damaged centrists can. I was actually in New Hampshire the day the first bimbo eruption happened. And I walked into his campaign headquarters, and every single volunteer and employee knew in their hearts that it was over. It was like walking into a wake. And the other candidates, their outfits were every bit as exuberant as Clinton's was despondent. But he overcame it, which tells me that lots of centrists could. So where are they?
Right.
Name me the one that's even making noise right now. And there aren't any. Ain't that something? There is some hope, though. And this is what got me onto this topic in the first place, because all I see are Democrats shooting themselves in the foot. And one of the ways that they shot themselves in the foot was allowing that little weasel, David Hogg. Remember him?
Oh, yeah, right.
They allowed that clown, I'm using my word, I know what I'm saying. I'm a wordsmith. I choose my words carefully. And that man, boy, whatever you want to call him, is an abject clown. He should be nowhere near any serious people trying to do serious things. And the Democrats have decided maybe it's time to get rid of him.
Really? He's too extreme even for them.
They've decided that maybe it's time to declare his election void.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the kind of dance with reality that I'm not accustomed to seeing Democrats make.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, they're doing it. I suspect you'll see the end of David Hogg, maybe even by the time this episode goes live. Well, that's actually quite encouraging. Perhaps another step can be taken after, and another, and before you know it, we might have an opposition party, and I would say we need a loyal opposition party. That matters in a constitutional republic. And we talked with Clark about the dangers of losing a constitutional republic. And, you know, part of the unwritten rules is being part of the loyal opposition. You can be against another group of people without demonizing them.
That's right.
It's about time people figured that out. A little baffling that they need reminders every 20 years or so, but here we are. All right, maybe that's cause for hope. I don't know, it's awfully thin, right? There's not a lot there. But every other place I look with the Democratic Party right now, I see them not only in disarray, but in disarray so badly, let's just say that they're so far offshore that they can't see the lighthouse anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as that's true, and that's a terrible thing to be true, but as long as that's true, they will be a minority party. They will not get anywhere in American politics. And I say this knowing how badly the Republicans can't wait to shoot themselves in both feet.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The Democrats have a good chance of moving forward so long as the Republicans keep doing what they're doing. We've gone through 2 presidential elections now in which neither party could come up with a reasonable candidate.
Oh, I think it's more than that. You can go back quite a while.
As much as I disliked Obama as a president, I could see him as being reasonable. I disagreed with so many of his policies, but I couldn't say he was unreasonable.
I'm not so sure I agree with you. I'm sure I agree with you that I didn't like his policies. I'm not so sure he was all that reasonable, but I take your point. Comparatively speaking, that's reasonable. And when you look at Obama v. Romney, okay, you had a couple of reasonable choices there.
Yep.
Reasonable enough. That was a while ago now.
Yeah.
We both lived in the same town when that was happening. And we haven't lived in the same town, let alone the same state, for a very long time.
Why, I hate to say it, but since that, the most reasonable of who we've seen since that point is Hillary.
Oh, no. No. You stop saying that right now.
I'm not saying she's reasonable. I'm saying she's the most reasonable. That tells you how unreasonable everything else is.
I'm going to stop the howling of our listeners and say, without a hint of reservation, that Gary Johnson was most reasonable.
Yeah, I can't even count him. I mean, look, I think he was the last gasp of the Libertarian Party.
I think that's right, because if we're right this second, about how crazy both parties are, if the Libertarians can't make a dent now, they can't make a dent ever.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's clear that no dent will be made.
Yeah.
I tend not to speak in the passive voice, but there you go.
You're in a market where the plurality of customers don't like either of your leading brands.
There are nothing but crappy products. It's like Pepsi and RC Cola out there, and Coke can't figure out a way to get to market.
Right. Yeah.
It is baffling. It's just baffling. I don't know. I'm kind of heartbroken by the whole thing, but I'm somehow aware that this nonsense keeps us in business, so it's okay. Keep electing these lunatics, and we'll just keep right on insulting them, and everybody will be happy enough.
It does keep us in business, but I hate to sound trite, but honestly, I think the solution is that we stop being at each other. I've been in so many situations where I'll say something quite reasonable. If people perceive that I'm of the same party as they are, they'll listen and engage. If they perceive that I'm of a different party, it's name-calling the whole thing.
And I'm happy to point out that no matter which party you're in, I am not in the same party as you.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It's funny because I'll use that. I'll say, well, but I didn't vote for Trump. And people just assume, oh, he voted for Harris. He's one of us. No, didn't vote for her either.
So you wasted your vote.
All the people out there who voted for Harris or Trump wasted their vote by not voting with me.
I agree completely. Those people did, in fact, waste their votes. And if you decide who to vote for this way, right, by just picking a party and saying anything else other than one of these two jackwagons, anything else is a waste of your vote, I would declare that you probably don't know what a waste of a vote looks like, because you're the very definition of it.
And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time, send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.